Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Our guest today is Sarah MacDonald, who has a really big job. And she didn't tell me about this when we first met. We were on a kayaking trip with our club down in the Dry Tortugas. And I told everybody to get up and meet me for sunrise. And only one person could get up that early. And that was Sarah MacDonald. So we're up there. And I had no idea that she was such an accomplished leader at all, because that's how humble she is. And that's why I'm telling that story. Because if you can go through a career and have this much income and be this real and full of heart, you've won the game. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I will tell people now the secret job is she is the Global Deputy Head of Security for Siemens Energy. And that is really big right now. So if you can just tell our listeners briefly, what does that mean?
So Siemens Energy is a company that is involved in just about every aspect of delivering energy to the world, to the globe. From building power plants to building wind farms to your transmission grids to smart solutions, we do all of that. We are in many countries worldwide. We have 90,000 employees, and we have a strong vision around the future and our role to help the planet decarbonize and improve efficiency and assist with the transition to clean energy.
But as you're doing all this, a lot of what you do is you're protecting the power grid as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Our solutions assist in reliability of existing sources of power, definitely. Yeah.
So how did you wind up down here in Florida with that New Jersey accent?
Yeah, great question. I was in the UK. I was married to an American. I moved over to America to be with him. Unfortunately, I had to wait a while to finish up things in the UK. And by the time I got here, he'd met somebody else. So I'm on my own on the outskirts of Orlando, and I'm doing what everyone says you should never do. I'm applying for jobs that are in the newspaper. And I got invited for an interview, and somebody took a chance on the British female with the green card, and the rest is history. I've had a fabulous career with Siemens Energy since then.
And I not only brag on that, you also were with Scotland Yard.
Not specifically. Scotland Yard is a place in London. That is the headquarters of the London Metropolitan Police. So everybody thinks that Scotland Yard is the police in the UK.
Really?
It's a place in London. I worked further south in the UK in a county called Hampshire, and I worked many times in London, but I was never actually in the Metropolitan Police, which would have meant then that I was at Scotland Yard. But I have visited Scotland Yard.
So what were you, a street cop, a detective? What'd you do?
Everyone starts in the UK, everyone starts as a street cop, as it were. Most of my career, I was a detective sergeant. I finished up as an inspector, working in the north of Hampshire, on the outskirts of London.
And so those were in some days where they weren't necessarily welcoming to women in departments. Well, at least here they weren't. How about there?
I think, yes, there was. I certainly had some challenges I mean, to tell a story, Fawn, I went for an interview for a position on a surveillance unit, and one of the questions that they asked me, they looked at me very seriously, and they said, "You know that this job means you have to be in a car with a man, right? How's your husband going to feel about that?" And I said, you know, given that he doesn't have a job right now, he's probably just going to be really glad that one of us is able to pay the mortgage. But that being said, that's true, and those types of things did happen. But I also will say, I got some fantastic opportunities. I was picked for a pretty sensitive inquiry, and things like that. There were also, for all of the people that had some old stereotypes, there were leaders then who knew that they wanted to build diverse teams. They wanted different skill sets on their teams, and there were plenty of opportunities as well.
So from that, I think you probably learned a lot about how to be effective in male-dominated environments, which, a lot of our listeners aren't in law enforcement, but probably have a lot of the same battles. So what do you know about being heard that we may not know?
Security in the business world, Fawn, is all about making your case. And I think it doesn't really matter whether you're a man or a woman. You're going in, you have to be able to make your case for the things that you need the business head, the CEO, to agree to do. So you have to be able to explain it in a way that they understand, and not just have security as a matter of policy, but how does security enable the business to be effective? So, we have policies to enable people to travel safely, for example. It's not about saying, no, you can't travel to a particular country where we need to put in a new transmission line, or, add a greenfield project site. It is about how can you do that safely? So it's all about making the case in a way that they can understand the contribution to the overall business effectiveness. And I think when you look at it through that lens, you are able to frame your argument and be plausible and hopefully be effective. That's what I've learned.
You are raising an excellent point in a moment that I think many of our listeners, particularly women in corporate, struggle with. And that is putting together a strong argument. And I want to just sort of lay out a few things that you said, and then I want to follow it up with a question. You talked about, one, being able to put it in the terms that the stakeholder speaks. You talked about being able to translate the business impact or value. And then you spoke about just a strong communication, just right. So it's the data, the facts, and the communication. But many of I think, particularly again, women, they struggle with even figuring out, how do I gather that information so I can put together the strong case? What advice would you give, or how do you go about doing that to be effective?
To be effective. So I think firstly, for anything that I want to do, I understand. I'm fortunate. I've been with the company a long time. I know the history of the company, but you have to know, what's the history of the company? What has led it to be where it is now? And where does it, what's its goals? Where's it, what are the visions that the company has for the future? As I said, we have a strong focus towards, for example, decarbonization. So I understand that. So I think you have to understand the company's culture and what its history is, what has it done, what has it overcome, and where is it going? And then frame your argument, your case with that knowledge. You probably have to do, if you're starting out, you're going to have to do a bit of reading. about the business, maybe talk to people that have been there a long time and find out what works. Do they need very, very specific data, or do they need, a higher level picture of the benefits, the costs and the benefits to whatever it is you want to implement?
When you're making a case, how do you know how much information to present? I've always argued keep it 3 points because nobody's going to remember more than that. But you're talking about big issues. Do you follow the same kind of a rule?
It's hard to say. It depends on the topic that you're talking about. I think you have to be able to make the case literally with one slide. But I remember going to see.
Wait. That's big. What did you just say?
Make your case with one slide. If you can fit it on one PowerPoint slide, you can understand it.
And that's not 8 font.
No. So I think you should be able to understand it, that you could break it down to that. But I will also say that I've sat in presentations or sat in meetings, and you've seen the where people get bored with slide after slide after slide, and then people start picking up their phones. So you have to understand and be able to state your case briefly. But equally, I've had a situation where I've gone in expecting a manager to just want to give me 5 minutes. And how do I make my case in 5 minutes? And they said, hold on, Sarah, slow down. These are important matters. Talk to me about what you need. And then, you bring the background and you bring the perspective, and you show that you have got the facts and the figures to back it up. This might be, some supporting slides or a written report that you have, whatever you are, that you can speak to it. But you should be able to say, I think you should be able to try to put that topic on one slide, but then have the backup information to support it.
See, I agree with that. I was always taught as a writer that you can boil any story down to one sentence, sometimes 2 sentences, but really not. You don't really need more. And if you don't know those 2 sentences or your bullet points, you really don't know what you're talking about, because you have to find a way to make it so that it's palatable.
How do people practice that? Because I think this point we're on right now is just incredibly powerful wisdom for our listeners. So I think conceptually they're like, okay, that makes sense. I've heard that before, but how do I learn the skill to do that? Where would you point them? How would you guide them?
How would I guide them? Well, I think you have, obviously there are some technical skills about different ways to present information. If you're presenting the information visually, so everything has to be, on a slide, there's all sorts of presentation skills you can get. If you are sitting in a meeting and making your case, then you obviously have to do your research beforehand. I will tell you that I have done, when I know a topic's important, I've asked a friend to rehearse me, and literally sat down and said, this is point A, this is point B, this is point C. How long does it take? Do you understand what point I'm trying to get across? How would you change it? And that ensures that when you're going in to pitch to an executive or something, you're being respectful of their time. You're showing that I've actually done the effort to make sure I'm asking for 10 minutes of your time. And I know that I can make my case in 10 minutes. So, yeah, but I think understanding all of our executives are busy and being respectful. So, yeah, I will rehearse with somebody to make sure that I can get my point across.
That is good. We were talking a little early, and I don't want to forget to ask you about this. About what was your defining moment through all of this that brought you to this point? I know it's a hard steer to the left here, but
yeah. So I'm going to say that for me, it's the events of Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. I was in Orlando, and I had heard that there'd been one plane, and I was walking across to it. I thought, gosh, how awful. And your immediate thoughts are with the people that were on that plane. And I'd started to walk to another building for a meeting when I heard that it was a second plane. So I knew immediately that it was a very significant terrorist attack. And I just turned around and cancelled that meeting, went back to my desk, and just stopped for about 5 minutes and thought, what are all of the things that I have to think about? And in that 5 minutes, it was a kind of a, give the language, but kind of an oh shit moment of this is what I have to do. I have to, a whole list of things that I have to think about for our people overseas, for our facilities in the US, for our actions as an organization. We relied on people being able to travel. That was profoundly affected. We had to find people wherever they were, account for them, decide if we needed to evacuate them. We had people in some countries where, we had to get them out very, very quickly, make those decisions quickly. And some of the actions that I took, I was criticized for. But then later, in hindsight, people came and said, I know we criticized you, but those were the right decisions. And I gained quite a lot of trust from the organization as the result of that experience. Although at the time, I really thought a couple of times was, I'm going to be fired because of some of the decisions that I had to take very quickly.
Well, what was your job then? And then why was that such a tenuous kind of thing to be making those decisions?
Because I was the head of security in the US, making decisions about Americans wherever they were in the world, and giving them instructions to act in a particular way that didn't necessarily hadn't been completely aligned with all of the people in the country where they were. I was saying, these are Americans. We have to understand that these are people that we have to, their safety is our first priority, and take those decisions. So yeah, wasn't some feathers were ruffled, shall we say?
That's very powerful. So was that kind of your growing up moment?
I would say in many ways, yes. And the first 4 days after 9/11 was I could count the hours of sleep on one hand. But I think, from a personal standpoint, it meant that the horror of what happened that day didn't sink in because I was so busy, trying to understand all of the implications for our, American facilities, our personnel globally. And then finally, I think at the weekend, you stop and you think and you understand. And I just I cried, and really it sunk in exactly what had happened. I was able to stop focusing on tasks and decisions and reflect on what had actually happened to the nation.
How did that change how you lead or change you and how you looked at life, just going through that experience once you kind of came out of it?
I think it taught me, it taught me that I can, not that I can survive anything. I can make my case. I can make an argument for a decision that's been taken, even if it's a difficult decision. And then people will accept that decision. Again, as long as you can explain why you took those decisions. I think as leaders, people are often used to taking decisions with all of the facts, with all of the data, and then the decision practically makes itself. Often in my profession, you're having to make decisions without all of the facts and all of the data. And that's hard to then justify and say, this is the term VUCA, this is a very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous situation. But this is the best information that we have, and we believe this is the best decision. That's hard because, often, people are making decisions, they're carefully evaluating data and information, they're considering everything because that's what they are trained to do. But sometimes you have to take decisions when you don't have all of the best information and all of the best facts available. And those are the decisions that you then have to say, right, I did this based on what information I had available. This is the best decision that we could make at the time.
Has it been a bit of a rerun of that since war broke out in Ukraine?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Of course, that situation is highly volatile and highly complex. And looking at, trying to understand the global implications of that in terms of the different continents where we're working. Yeah, that is a big factor. For example, I was sitting on a presentation about the implications of grain shortages in Africa, for example, and what that will mean for the potential for civil unrest, for example, and how that translates to us doing our jobs, ensuring fair, compensation for people that we're employing, and the need to consider different factors in countries that are, geographically so away from the conflict, from the war in Ukraine, but completely affected by it. The geopolitical fallout from this war is on a global scale.
Are you scared about the future?
No, I'm not scared. I think there is a lot of there is a lot of cohesion, and there, to my mind, if you're talking about the outcome of the war, no, because I think the cohesion is there to ensure that this aggression is addressed properly. I think the outcome for a lot of people there will be some very, very difficult things that people have to do. We see the reports of extreme poverty and food and starvation for a number of countries that perhaps the outcomes might have been different for them without the Russian invasion of the Ukraine and the blockade of the port. But I think politically, the consensus has been strong, and I think that consensus will hold to send a strong message about the fact that this aggression will fail. I hope so.
But your job depends a lot on your being very well versed in what some of us don't even know about, right?
It depends. It's important, Fawn. It's important that I read and I try to understand the situation in the country. It's not what is behind a report of civil unrest, for example. If we're building let's say we're going into a country and we want to build a power plant, we have to articulate the value of that asset to the community in terms of jobs, in terms of the provision of resources for the population. Can I tell you a story about Peru?
We like stories.
Yes, we do.
So I decide to do a trek to Machu Picchu in Peru across a trail called the Salcante Trail. And I aligned it with some reviews of our project sites that we were building power in and around the capital city of Peru. And as I'm hiking on the Salcante Trail, we start out and we're staying overnight in farmsteads where there is no electricity, and everything stops at 6 o'clock at night. When it's dark, the children go to bed, everyone goes to bed, it's quiet and it's completely dark. As you moved nearer to the city, from Machu Picchu to the city, and you started to see the towers, the transmission towers and electricity, everything changed. You got into the town and children were on computers doing their homework. Somebody was talking on a phone, able to communicate with somebody in the next town. Businesses were open because they could have the lights on in their shops. And that showed me what we achieve as a company, that we literally bring power, we bring light into communities. And when I can, having experienced that, I try then to explain that to communities, about the difference that the construction of something will make. Obviously, everyone's concerned about the environment. Everyone wants clean energy. And I think I'm very proud of the progress that Siemens Energy is making to ensure and to further that. But I've seen how lives changed because of what we do. And I'm very proud to be part of that company.
How vulnerable are we with our power grids here?
There is a very strong regulatory background, regulatory framework in the US to ensure that reliability is built into the grid. Most US utilities are part of a federal body that requires them to assure reliability through a number of different ways to avoid what we would term in the industry cascading failures. And they have to meet particular standards of availability, security. For example, there's a very strong security framework to ensure that people can't hack into their networks, and to protect control systems from compromise, and to ensure redundancy is built into the system. There's a lot of security requirements and assurance requirements to be part of the grid in the US.
So, Michelle, do you have a bunch of money socked away just in case something goes south?
I have money socked away, but I don't know if it's enough in case everything were to go south. I'm not prepared to live on the land, I'll say that.
Because I was surprised when I asked you that question, Sarah. So, should we have a big bundle of cash stocked away in case something doesn't go right?
No.
Because?
No, because I believe that the utilities are. I do work with the utilities through the American Society of Industrial Security. The representatives are very, very proactive about security and maintaining assurance on the grid. And secondly, nobody, in my opinion, nobody should have large amounts of cash, or certainly not be talking about it on a podcast that somebody could research you and come and break into your house.
So I know that it's on a lot of people's minds. Now I want to switch you back into the women's leadership role, where you spend a lot of time as a role model to many. And, Michelle and I talk a lot about how people get into power and sometimes don't own it right away. And I'm just curious, you come off so confident. Is that for real? Do you ever have that imposter syndrome?
Oh, I have spent 44 years waiting for people to find me out. So yes,
Oh, Lord.
absolutely. I definitely have. I definitely have the imposter syndrome.
Still.
Yeah. But I would say that for me, what I have learned is when somebody pays you a compliment and or says thank you, thank you for this, thank you for helping me, or pays you a compliment, hey, that was a great presentation. I believe them and I bank it, so that when I'm thinking about something, and it's sometimes good to be nervous. You should never be overconfident about anything. You should be perhaps sometimes be nervous to make sure you're doing your preparation. But when I have those doubts, and we all have those doubts, I go to my bank and I pull out my compliments and my thank yous, and I remember and I use them. I withdraw from my bank. I think everyone has to have their bank that they can withdraw from when they need it.
Oh, I love that.
What do you do whenever you said you say thank you? Like, I think that's a big lesson too, because what do most women do? They start, oh, no. It's not a big deal. That's my team. It's us. It's all, I mean, we all do this.
Great support.
Yeah. But yes, of course, thanking people is important. I would say that one of the things that I consider to be so important that if I was to turn my camera, you would see it. You would see it on my calendar written. Feedback is a gift.
Yeah.
So that every day I'm looking up at that and reminding myself that positive or negative, feedback is a gift. Take it, reflect on it, and use it for the future. So yeah, I would say that's what I do. All feedback is a gift.
I've built my career on the feedback, helping companies listen to customers and employees to understand what's happening with them so they can continuously improve and always stay relevant. So I very much appreciate your comment about the importance of taking it in and receiving feedback.
Yeah, but even the negative, because so many people are worried that, just they crumble if somebody criticizes them. And I think in most cases, people don't criticize you unless they think you're worth improving. So it really is a gift.
Yes. Yeah. Whatever. I have had things that you could perceive and as criticism, but you take it, as you say, this is somebody that actually wants to help you improve. So they must think enough of you that they want you to do better. They're not writing you off. They just think you can do better. And let's face it, we can all do better. We can always do better. And that's why I've learned. And every time I get my calendar for the next year, I write in big letters on top, feedback is a gift. Very important.
So true. So when you mentor other women there, what are the issues that they come to you most frequently to talk about?
It literally varies. So I have had women who've asked me for guidance on, managing meetings, for example. Hey, I'm going into a meeting with the senior executive, and I'm not sure how to deal with it. And we'll talk about, preparation, obviously rehearsing and making your case, but then treating the meeting as if you have requested their presence, not the other way around.
Wait a minute, that's awesome.
That they have come to meet with you, and taking that approach, obviously being respectful of their time. And it's not about arrogance. It is about recognizing that you have a right to sit at the table and to make your case to the executives, to the group of executives, to the meeting. They have come to meet with you, and you and they are going to listen to what you have to say. So you prepare, but mentally you understand that they have come to meet with you. Yeah, that's one of the pieces of advice that I give. I mean, otherwise, I wouldn't want to differentiate between whether a man is coming to me for advice or a woman. In the security world, women, there's been a tremendous progress for women to advance and to be successful in the security world from when I joined private security back in 1998. We now have a thriving, women in security community, both in the US and globally. There are women at senior leadership positions in many of the major organizations. It really is a good news story in terms of a lot of the women that I work with and collaborate with in the security profession. There's been so much advancement in that area. It was previously male dominated, but there's been tremendous change and growth.
So if it was so male dominated, how did you stand out without getting tromped on?
How did I stand out? I'm not going to underestimate the benefit of being the stroppy Brit with the funny accent. That's is probably
got to use your assets,
It's
right?
so
Got to use your assets.
Yeah.
It's probably probably one of my challenges, Fawn, is that I that everybody remembers that British woman, with that, in security. So I suppose I kind of I exploit that a little bit, but it is about, from my perspective, understanding everyone's perspective. Not coming in and saying, this is a security policy, for example, not relying on rules to make my case, but really understanding that I exist to support the business. I will end meetings where I'm talking to large groups of employees, from an executive down to the person in the mailroom, and say, I work for you. So how can I help you? And understanding that, and I'm sincere about that, because I do work for them. It's not the other way around. And I think recognizing that, and if you're sincere about that, people respect you more than if you say, I'm the security head and this is the security policy. No, I work for you, and how can I help you succeed?
That's great leadership.
That's great. Well, so this has been awesome. And I'm telling you, as I was just sitting here taking notes, reflecting on the things you were saying, the big headline I heard was confidence. And because you talked about confidence in knowing the information and being able to do the research to understand the facts and the situation, confidence in your ability to put a story together appropriately using the right communication tactics in order to get a yes and support from your leadership, confidence in how you show up to those meetings and your right to be there. I mean, every aspect of what you shared was really about just finding your power and standing in strength and confidence in what you do. And I think that is such a wonderful lesson for our listeners to take away from this conversation. So, Sarah, thank you so much for that.
Wait, one more point with what you said, with an asterisk, because she has all that confidence to do all of those things, but still has that imposter issue going on, which means keep showing up, keep delivering, no matter what, you can do it even if you don't feel secure in yourself at times.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
44, as I said, 44 years later, I still think I'm going to be found out. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because we should, certainly in the security world, you cannot be complacent, but you also, I think it does no good to be arrogant. You have to be humble and understand that, your role is to help other people succeed. And then when you're willing to help them succeed, they're willing to help you succeed.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. You are incredible. And I'll meet you in a kayak if you ever get back to this country after your next trip. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks,
Sarah.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.